So, hello everyone, and welcome to this panel about Impostor Syndrome. I guess most of you know what we will be talking about. Because otherwise, I guess that you wouldn't be here, unless you're here to just stand up and say, like, no, it's not a thing. You're all silly. But we know it's quite a big issue in our field, and we hope we can do something about it, and that's why we want to talk about it. Let's start with introducing our fantastic panelists. You have a mic that you're sharing, so make sure to talk into it. Marina, go ahead.
Hello. This is so nice, by the way, to be here again. I'm Marina Diez. I'm the CEO of 3 of Cups Games, which is an ethical and diverse games studio based in the UK, but we work with people from all around the world. And I'm also an emotional game designer.
Hi, I'm Ross. I think a few of you already know me. I'm a level designer at Coffee Stain Studios. I'm relatively new, and since the discussion is Impostor Syndrome, I currently have it now as well. So it's going to be coming up again.
I'm Beuger. I also work at Coffee Stain Studios together with Ross. And I've been through the Impostor Syndrome up and down a few times, so let's talk about that too.
Hello, my name is Jessica, and I am a concept artist here at the local studio Thunderful. I suck at introductions, so that's all I have.
It works quite well. So, Impostor Syndrome. Have you experienced it? And, yeah, can you tell us a story?
Yes,
Yeah.
all the time, especially when starting out, when you're new to something, right? It's always just like, you know nothing, you know nothing, you feel you know nothing, and that's kind of everything that keeps going through your mind all of the time. And especially when I started, for example, working at Coffee Stain for the first time, I was like, oh God, they'll know, they'll find me out, and I'll never stay here, and I'll have to find something else to do, and that kind of stuff, definitely.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of experience where when I started and you see colleagues being really busy, and you feel like, oh, maybe my pressure isn't that high, or maybe you're kind of in a down dip within your workflow, you start kind of questioning yourself. Am I not supposed to be as busy as everyone else? Or so if someone else is stressed out or has too much work, shouldn't I be as stressed out as them to show that I really belong here as well? And it's kind of a situation where it always starts when, at least for me, when I see someone else working way harder or they're stressed out, that I feel like I should be able to keep up, or I feel like I need to keep up in order to have my place here.
Yes.
Okay,
Jessica?
it's me now. Yeah, I mean, I'm an artist, so I think it's very common for artists to actually struggle with imposter syndrome because everything is, your skill level is so clearly visible in the things you produce. And I also feel that especially when you start out in the field, it feels like everyone knows what they're doing. Everyone has like their shit together, basically. And you might think like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but everyone else seems to be able to know that. But then as times go on, you realize that actually nobody knows what they're doing. They're just people doing their stuff, basically. So yeah.
I honestly still don't know sometimes why people pay me. And it's very weird. And at the same time, I know why people pay me. But you have those moments of thinking that your work is just, you know, like everyone else could do it. But the thing is that everyone is really unique. So we all do different stuff. And we all deserve to be paid and to be promoted. So, but it's super difficult because when we work in big teams, I think that it fades a bit what the others here said, that how much you work, maybe you don't need to work as much as others for achieving the same thing because everyone is different. And you know, like when you see those kind of things, it's a bit strange for yourself.
Ross, what you said, I mean, do you think that is could be one of the reasons we have the crunch culture in our industry? I mean, it's a very passionate industry. Everyone want to make the best games at all times, right? But then you see other passionate people. I mean, I've been an employer as well. You know, it's download, and you see people want to do this, but you can have to make them hold back, especially early on when you're very new in the industry, right? Do you think this crunch and imposter syndrome, are they connected?
There is a certain element of it, because when you see other people start working really hard or overtime, sometimes it feels like they are really carrying the project, and what is my place here? Should I be working as hard as they are? But as much as peer pressure can be a negative thing, can also be a positive thing, because it can create a workflow where everyone is working, you're kind of working in tandem, and it can be healthy. But when it goes to the point of having to compare yourself to someone else, if one pushes forward, you try to push forward, and if someone else then looks at you and they push forward, it becomes a standard. And that might become toxic. So yeah, I would say if it goes on too much, someone should ring the bell.
Definitely, sounds smart. Because there's also, as you talked about, like if people seem to be having very much to do, I mean, that's probably not you doing wrong, it's probably that they have been wrongfully scheduled, you know, having too much stuff to do, right? And it kind of makes that evil circle and making other people feel like they're not doing enough. Yeah, you're onto something there, definitely. And that's, I mean, that means it's a workplace issue, right? That should be handled from, a company needs to take that responsibility.
Yeah, something that can seem, that is basically an external problem. You, if you experience imposter syndrome, or if you're not very secure in the workplace that you are, you kind of start seeing it outside of that context, and you start seeing it like, oh, I have to meet that because that person makes that choice, or that is expected of me, and you kind of stop seeing the context in which it happens and seeing where the problem actually originates from, which has nothing to do with you, and has nothing to do with your worth. But that's kind of the problem, right, with imposter syndrome, is that you internalize these things, and that you start kind of seeing everything as a sign of your own incompetence. But it has nothing to do with you. Not always, maybe sometimes, but usually not. So yeah.
Yeah. Jessica, you were in it, but have you overcome your imposter syndrome? You said you realized no one else knows what they're doing anyway.
I don't know. I think imposter syndrome is something that you can get rid of, but you can also get it again, I think. I think it's a big risk if you, for example, starting a new project or something, or starting a new team where you might not feel as secure in your position and such things. So I don't know, it's a tough question, really. Do you ever? I don't know. But for me personally, right now I feel quite comfortable.
Did you have an eye-opening moment where you felt like, wait a minute, maybe it's not me?
I don't know, really. It's more like you... I think it's a lot about like encouragement you get from others as well. Actually being told that you're doing a good job. Something that I feel can fuel imposter syndrome. I know other artists who have experienced this as well, is when you don't really get any feedback on how you're actually doing. So you're just left in the dark there, wondering, am I actually doing a good job? Am I struggling right now, or do people think that this is good? Am I producing enough? I know other artists who struggle with this, and they actually have a bad habit of working overtime or secret overtime, especially now during the pandemic when people work from home. They basically work during the evenings because they feel that they have to produce more. They have to make up for that time that they might not have been as productive. So they work overtime all the time, like crunching by themselves, and nobody knows because they're like doing it in secret.
Others, have you overcome your imposter syndrome or had any of these?
No, I think it doesn't go away. But I think that what it's important is that we all get better at handling it, and that I think especially in teams it's important when you have the support of other people. And one thing that I found super useful was to share my concerns with the rest of the team, and then discover that other team members that I was looking at, they also were feeling vulnerable about their work. So that was very inspiring, and that also helped a lot to kind of create more bonds between us. And then I think, as there are so many students here, I think it's important, this story is important because my career started getting better in 2020 with the pandemic. And the year before I was just finishing my master in game design. And that year I thought that I needed to do everything. So basically, I went to every conference in the world. In March 2019, I was 1 week in GBC in San Francisco, and the next week I was in Thailand in another event. And sounds really cool, but I mean, at the same time, I was not taking care of myself at all. That's not healthy. It's exhausting. And the problem is that when you are in school, you think that you need to do all of this stuff in order to start in the games industry, because as you said, we are in an industry of lots of passionate people. And the problem is that when you need to choose between passion and your own needs, it's very complicated, because also you get other stuff like FOMO and, you know, or I'm not doing enough. And honestly, I wanted to tell you all that having a busy schedule doesn't mean you're better. It just means you're more busy. But, you know, like the goal should be to work less and do awesome work and be happier, not to work a lot and being miserable, because that's not the point about creating things, I think.
Amen.
Yeah, I want to mention that you actually nailed it quite well, because that's how I got rid of my imposter syndrome for a while. I basically just talked to Hannah, and I asked her, how do you do it? How do you keep doing just working 8 hours, just full on every single day? And she said, I have dips, it goes up and down. And then I felt like, okay, so if I'm not working, it doesn't necessarily mean that working means I am behind my computer producing stuff. Working can also mean taking care of yourself a little bit. Maybe take a break. If you have been, take a nap. Right? Even having an off day, it's good for your mental health. It's not bad to take care of yourself. You don't always have to be that productive every single day, because it will take a toll on you.
We're human, not machines, and if you treat yourself like a machine, it's only going to go bad for you. Yeah, don't. But in my case, like I'm currently in a good part. I'm on a mountain of the imposter syndrome. There will probably be a valley in my future somewhere as well. But kind of what Ross was saying, when I joined the company, basically what got me out of the imposter syndrome was very consistent trust and support. Just people that did not hesitate to give me responsibility and trust me to handle it. Gave me feedback on this, and basically the responsibility I started feeling by myself kind of got me out of that rut of like, okay, I don't belong here, because it's like, oh, well, I'm responsible for this thing. If I'm not here, this thing doesn't work. So there's no need to feel like I don't belong, because I do. I'm literally necessary for this thing to work. If I'm not there, it's not going to. So that is also, I think, sort of the work attitude and the environment that you have around you are very important to make sure that you feel appreciated, trusted, valuable, and all of those things, because imposter syndrome, it manifests itself internally, but I think a lot of external factors are a part of this that tell you whether you belong or not. So people around you should be very aware. Giving feedback, like you were saying, like if you don't get feedback, you don't know how you're doing, so you always assume the worst, right? And even sometimes when you do get feedback and you don't believe it, it can be very good to actually sort of sit down and be like, but okay, if I don't believe this feedback, that means I don't trust the person that is giving me feedback. And what does that say about our work relationship or personal relationship? And that is something to look at as well, of like, okay, me devaluing myself also means that I'm devaluing the people around me who tell me I am worth this. And that can be harmful to your relationships as well and to your career. So basically, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah.
Cool. So, have you ever caught an imposter?
Nah.
No, right?
No.
I'm really
Who's
bad at
thinking
it.
about what you're doing? It's like, nah, he's probably not good enough. We should get rid of him. Never happens, right? Why
not at
do
all.
we do this to ourselves?
We're our own worst enemy.
Yeah. So, let's see what I have on my little note here. Do you think different groups are more likely to suffer from imposter syndromes? I mean, when I started looking for people for this panel, we had quite a lot of ladies signing up or being interested. And I also heard that a lot of, solo devs or small indie devs who just start out from college or wherever, do their thing and then go super successful, and they're like, what? I didn't deserve this. What am I going to do with all my millions? How am I making? How do I feel like I have the right to all these millions of money when I don't know what I'm doing? Do you think it's a thing? Or do you think everyone is equally,
I don't know with the indies because like when I discuss this, I like discussing this with people just to check around how people are experiencing it and stuff. And I don't really have that perspective of someone who's like, yeah, I'm making a big buck now. I think it's that it definitely happens. But I think, especially that you mentioned that a lot of women are signed up for this. I think a reason why many women feel imposter syndrome is because we don't have as many opportunities in the industry. It's harder for us to get a position, and we often have to work harder to get the same amount of recognition that the other colleagues get. For example, it's easier to get recognition when you're a man, basically, for some reason.
patriarchy?
Yeah.
Fucker.
And I also feel that it's common for people outside of your team to also sometimes question your credentials a bit as well. So yeah, I think it's rough, but I think many women feel like that.
Marina?
I think that definitely marginalized game developers feel this much worse than any other group, especially because it's not only what Jessica mentioned already about the opportunities, but also how others act towards us when we want to grow in our careers. It's not only that it's not opportunities, it's also lots of people kind of bringing you down and saying to you that you're not able to do that. Like I grew as a game designer making bitsy games, which is something that doesn't require code at all. And I've been through years of people kind of telling me that I was not making real games because I was not coding them. But you need to start somewhere. And, you know, like no one borns with the code in their heads. It's impossible. So, you know, there's lots of people like that you're gonna find in your path, and it happens. Like recently, I got one of my games, Dordogne, into Wholesome Direct, what was part of E3, and I told a friend that was a white male that is not my friend anymore. You're gonna understand why. And he was like, "Wow, you're doing well." I was like, "Yeah, like Dordogne was in E3," and he was like, "Well, not E3. You know, it was part of Wholesome Direct, which was part of E3, but he said, no, it's not." So, you know, these kind of attitudes, in the end, if you don't have the confidence of other friends around and your work, that, you know, brings you down a lot. And that's a lot what it happens as well, besides the fact that we don't have as many opportunities.
So what I want to mention for the one, if you're really successful, let's say you're an indie company and you sold millions or whatnot, you sold millions. I think that's an answer by itself. You've figured something out there. I don't think you need approval of a lot of other studios to tell you whether you did something good or not. You sold millions. So don't feel bad about that. And when it comes to whether some marginalized groups would feel more imposter syndromes or have more opportunities for it, it's definitely a possibility, because at a certain point I even question myself, am I really being hired for my skills or because I'm a minority? And I wouldn't be surprised if there are going to be more cases of that. So for me, even it was a bit of an uphill fight to figure out, do I really have the skills to be here, or am I here to fill a certain quota? But luckily that is currently gone, that self-doubt, so I'm very happy with where I am now.
Fantastic. Hannah?
Yeah, it kind of goes into what I was talking about before with the external factors. If you're a marginalized person, if you're a minority, in general, society tells you constantly that you are worth less. So of course, that will get internalized and you will start thinking that when it comes to work, you are also worth less, right? So I feel that definitely there is something there. But there is also, on the flip side, there is something when it comes to, for example, men being told constantly that you have to achieve a certain level of success or you do not matter. You always have to be the best. You always have to be at the top, which is also really toxic. So basically, I think it manifests itself differently for different reasons. But I do think that a lot of people, like no matter who they are, they have something telling them like that they can't do this or that they're worth less. But so I think pretty much any way you look at it, there's potential there. And when it comes to the indie game thing, if you're suddenly successful and you're not prepared for that, that can be incredibly overwhelming. And especially the pressure that comes with that, because suddenly you have millions of people looking at you and looking at what you do and suddenly interested in what you do, and you're like 5 people. You're like, how are we going to keep this up? Because that's always kind of a feeling you get, right? That you have to stay relevant. You have to stay on top. You have to keep performing as high as you are. You don't want to have just peaked. You don't want to think about this thing that we just did is the best thing we're ever going to do, right? So you always feel like you have to get better, like you have to do more, and that pressure can be crippling. And I think that sort of manifests itself in imposter syndrome, where you start self-doubting because you're like, this is just luck. Like, there's no way we can do this again.
I can't do it again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of also a way of coping with that pressure of like, if it was just luck, then we don't have to, right? We don't have to try to see if we can do another 5 million sales. Yeah.
But that also feels like a culture in the industry. Like if you didn't do the top of the line hit game, you know, on Steam, then you failed. It's like, we're doing good money.
As long as you survive, you're good.
But that's kind of, then you're not recognized. You're just, okay, game developer, fine. Well, so that we kind of, you know, we foster that as well, right? If we don't I mean, there's a lot of great games out there, even if they don't hit the top, right? So, and I think we should definitely be more considerate about that.
I think that's actually related to sort of that rock star mentality that still exists very much of like, oh, I'm the auteur, I'm the person responsible for the success, and that people like put people on pedestals all the time. But it's really unhealthy.
Yeah, there's a lot of average Joes and Joe sets out there. No, is it? Wait, yeah. Cool. So, but I also, now when we talked about it, it feels like we have a conflict here. We say women have to do, and marginalized genders and developers have to prove themselves so much more to get a chance. So apparently we're going to be better than people when we get the chance, right? But then as soon as you get the chance, you're going to get said, oh, it's because you're marginalized, you know. So it's kind of, you can't win, right?
Yep.
Damn it, Baarh. Yep, okay, now I get angry. In and out. Yeah, so how can we get better? How can we make it less of a problem? You talked a bit about, you know, the feedback thing. How can workplaces foster a culture that, you know, works against imposter syndrome? Because it feels like it's going to be on the company, right? It feels to be a lot about leadership and culture.
Yeah, definitely. But I think one of the main reasons why it's so common in the games industry is because it's based on passion, and there's a lot of competition for the positions. So I think you can't solve this problem in a company alone, since it's a industry problem, really. And I think something that can be common for artists, for example, especially if you're a 2D artist, is that we're basically quite replaceable. And I've noticed, especially when you study, for example, I was constantly being told, like, yeah, you're never gonna get a job. I was at a party where I was voted, like, it was on a drinking game, and I was voted the most likely person to get on unemployment after finishing their studies, and that was just based on me being a 2D artist, nothing more. And I think it's important for companies to actually show that everyone is important to the team, like what you're doing, even if you're replaceable in like those skills, you're still important to the team. And I mean, you're so much more than your position as well. And I think what also fosters those feelings can be that you usually, if you're replaceable, you also earn less. And if you're a woman, you might also earn less than your male colleagues, and that can also make you feel less valued to the team. So that's something, I think if a company works against that, then maybe they can battle this, because I think having employees who actually feel imposter syndrome is detrimental to the company, because they won't actually perform as well, probably. They might strain themselves by overworking, like when I talked about like the secret overtime. Those people that I know that do this, that are artists, they actually start to get problems with like carpal tunnel and all that stuff, because they're constantly working. They're not actually resting their limbs, so they basically shorten their career by damaging themselves. So I think it's very important to talk about, and I don't think it's being talked about enough, really.
I was thinking that one thing that surprised me a lot in the industry is that when funding a new studio and things like that, everyone is running for getting funding, but no one is running for building a great culture. And I think that's also one of the problems that we have in the industry. Like in the case of my company, 3 of Cups, it's difficult to find funding, but one of the things that I wanted to kind of do since the beginning was to implement a great culture as much as we could. And it doesn't matter if you are just 7 or 700, because in the end, for me, the most important thing is that everyone making games in my company or in my team feels good at it. And in the case of Impostor Syndrome, sometimes it helps to us to do rounds of compliments, which doesn't mean that you're not going to give constructive feedback after, like during work, but also like making everyone feel valuable as a person, not only as a professional. I think is what makes the difference in the long run.
Yeah, very much agree with that. And I also think like on the smaller scale, especially when someone is new to the company or new to the industry in general, having a mentor, I think, can make a huge difference. Just someone to talk to, someone that can show them the ropes, just someone that can be trusted to help get this person through these things, because I think it's inevitable that these things happen, or that you might start getting these thoughts. But yeah, just giving people tools to manage them, I think, is also very important. And I think a mentor in that sense is very important. And that was kind of something like what you said as well, like people that kind of work themselves into injury. Like I did that when my mentor basically left, and we were in the middle of like a big deadline season, and I had to prove my worth. Suddenly I was thrown into this like big responsibility was suddenly on my shoulders. I wasn't really prepared for it. There was no one else equipped that could help me or mitigate these issues, and I worked myself into a hand injury, and I'm still dealing with that, and that's years ago. And that's the kind of stuff where I think is really important for leadership to recognize like where these things can go wrong, and how people, especially if they're new and a lot of responsibility is thrown on them without any guidance, that can go wrong because you don't know how to deal with it yet. So in that sense, staying in touch with your team is incredibly important.
I'm going to talk about this in perspective of my internship. When I just joined in, one of the designers was about to leave. So I felt the pressure of having to replace a designer who was already working there for many years. But what I noticed is that when the work ethics is being enforced by everyone in the team, the pressure became a lot lighter. So after 6, I was actually just kicked out of the office. No working. If I see a push after 6, I will revert it. You go rest. So if everyone actually enforces you to not overwork, take care of yourself, you will slowly also fall into it. But for that, you need to have co-workers that actually want to go with the same headspace and the same mentality for it.
Yeah, it should be on all of the layers, all of the parts of the company should be part of this and enforce
exactly.
this.
Yeah. Cool. So, this is actually the last question on my list, I think. What would be your best advice for aspiring game devs who are fighting imposter syndrome today?
Find a mentor if you can. I mean, events like this are amazing for this. Get into contact, ask your questions, make sure that someone can, tell you what not to do, especially. And then also do your research into the companies, like Marina was saying. Like, your company is all about fostering this amazing culture. Those are the companies you want to apply for. Those are the companies you want to talk to, because that can also teach you a lot. Yeah.
I think my advice is also for myself, that you don't have to be perfect and you don't need to know everything. This is super important because, like, I think it's very related to the kind of rising of rock stars in the games industry. Like, it happens a lot that, and it's also very related to being very busy. That we think that everyone else is doing the same, and it's not true. And like, I think everyone is unique, and we all need to take care of our needs first. And even if the games industry is very cool, we are very passionate, honestly, it's just a job. So, like, I think that's very important, because for me also it's very difficult to separate my persona of person working in the industry from Marina the person, like, for me sometimes I wake up in the morning and I feel like all my life is around the games industry, my friends are from the games industry, and it's amazing, but at the same time it's not possible that we feel that without the games industry we don't have anything, because it's not true. And that also it's very much related to being perfect and like, oh my goodness, I need to fit here. So don't be perfect, just really be yourself, even if it sounds very cliche, but it's true. And you don't need to know everything.
Jessica?
Yeah, I think this is very important to remember, is that your self-worth isn't tied to what you produce or your skill level. I think that's something that most developers, they make game developing like their identity, kind of, and you tie it to your self-identity, and you basically value yourself based on these parameters. And I think it's very toxic for you to do that, and also it kind of makes you toxic to your colleagues as well, because if you have that mentality that your value is based on what you produce and what your skill level, you're probably going to think that about others as well. And I also think it's very important to remember to be kind to yourself, but also to be kind to others, because if you lift others up, they're going to lift you up as well, and you get a much happier team, basically.
I think what was said here was pretty much nailed down very well. And to go back to what Hannah said, you're human. It's okay to be human. Find a company or set a work environment where it's okay to be human. At some places we need to lower down what we see as working hard, and that when you're not working, it doesn't mean that you're not progressing. Taking care of yourself and your mental health also means that you're progressing as a person. You can still make cool games and take care of yourselves, but you need to find that balance. It isn't always just work, and then hope for the best. Take care. It's still a job, of course, yeah.
Cool. So we're going to do questions from the audience now, unless anyone have something they felt like we haven't touched upon in the panel that you want to get out there.